Okay, YouTube friends, another project on the 1956 Chevy Apache. Today I'm going to start to convert the brake system to a Firewall mounted booster and master cylinder, which I bought from Western Chassis. It's right here on the floor. Got the booster, the master cylinder, and the bracket that holds it underneath the dash. The old bracket is spot welded on. It needs to be cut out or drilled out. And it's going to be a fairly significant job. All the brake lines have to be rerouted, rebled, etc. The reason I'm doing this is the under the floor system that's currently on the truck is about an inch away from the exhaust pipe. And so it gets very, very hot. I did put a heat shield in, but it's still very inconvenient to have that heat shield down there. Also, I was having trouble getting the adjustment between the brake booster and the master cylinder aligned. There's a pin that connects the two of these, and it's adjustable, and there's, I don't know, something like 5/1000 of an inch clearance, maintained between that. You get it too tight and the brakes eventually lock up on you as you're driving because it doesn't release, and it just keeps building up pressure and building up pressure. If you get it too loose, you get a soft pedal and you don't get good brakes, and brakes are very important. I did an earlier conversion. We put disc brakes on the rear of this guy, and so safety is very important. And with this being very accessible in the engine compartment, and plus I'll be able to adjust it before I even install it. I should be able to get that pin accurately adjusted, and this should be a good upgrade. I got the chrome version, so it should look good under the hood as well. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, first thing that has to do is the dash has to come off. There's only 2 screws holding this digital dash on, and I have a quick disconnect plug on all the wiring. So that was a good move when I installed that. The steering column has to come off. It's not the original steering column on this truck, so it's going to be interesting how this gets mounted to the new one. But it's got to come off because the bracket holding this has to come off. So this is the bracket we need to remove, which is welded. It's the original. It's welded onto the truck, and that's going to be the biggest part of the job, is probably getting that bracket off. And then after that, we'll get underneath the truck, remove the old master cylinder and booster, which was upgraded, but due to the problems I already described, we're going to get rid of it and get started. So I'm going to remove the dash, real easy, 2 screws, unplug it. In my case, a traditional truck, you'd have to unscrew the speedo cable, remove all the lights and wiring, and then it looks like the steering column is mounted here to the underneath of the dash. We'll get that guy lowered, and if we have to, we'll remove it. Eventually we might replace that steering column too. All right, for me there were 3 screws to remove the dash. 1, 2, and then 1 down at the bottom corner. And then I just have to unplug these wires, and that guy's out of there. All right, we got the dash out. I got the steering column lowered. I simply unplugged the wire and harnesses from the bottom of it, and undid these 2 bolts that were, in my case, that were holding that up. And I kind of want to see how this thing's going to fit in there before I start cutting. And so I put the pieces together here just very loosely, and notice that there's a piece missing in my kit. There's got to be something that goes between this brake arm and the rod on the booster. There's got to be something that screws into here and pivots and screws onto here, and I don't have that in my kit, so I got to call the company and see what that's all about. In the meantime, I'm going to see how this fits and works with my current steering column before I start cutting the pieces off. All right, here's my plan of attack. This new bracket that replaces this old bracket, this guy, and here, and it's spot welded up there. And apparently it's just these two bolts right here in the front, and a couple of bolts. Let's see if I can point to it. You can't see them, but right here on both sides on the firewall. I understand these spot welds are a bitch to get out. So this thing goes back straight for about 8 inches. So let me get 8 inches, put it right there, even with the bolts. So it goes back 8 inches to about there. So I think if I just cut this bracket right here, the little hand hacksaw or an air hacksaw, whatever I can get in there, and cut this bracket right here on both sides, and then remove the 4 bolts, the 2 bolts right here at the front of the dash that are holding the steering column bracket currently, and then the 2 bolts on the bottom. I think I can get that bracket out fairly easily. So that's the plan. Okay, just to be a little more clear, let me zoom in so you can get a reference point. I'm going to cut this bracket right here and right here, right there on both sides. And I'll cut this bracket here and here, and then unbolt it from the bottom, unbolt these 4 bolts, and it should come off. All right, before I cut the brackets, I'm going to remove the bolts. This is the bolt holding the lower bracket on the one side. Here's the other one, and they get removed from the inside. There's 2 bolts holding this remote reservoir for my master cylinder that I added a few months ago. It's a shame, I'm just going to get rid of it. But there's 2 bolts on the inside holding this on as well. So I took a turkey baster and I emptied these reservoirs. I'm going to take these lines off and try to drain them neatly, and then I'll unbolt this remote reservoir. All right, I got 2 ways I can cut this out. One is with the electric cutting wheel, which I could probably fit up in there. And the other is by hand with a mini hacksaw. And I started, and after about 30 seconds, I was able to, make some significant progress. I just feel more comfortable doing it by hand, so I'm going to use the mini hacksaw. And I don't think it'll take me a half hour to make all 4 cuts, and a lot less can go wrong that way. All right, I ended up using the angle grinder because the part that was up against the firewall, the flat part, I couldn't get that with a hacksaw on both sides. So we got it, we made the 4 cuts. 1, 2, 3, and then 4 right there. And what we got is a piece off These are the 4 cuts, 1, 2, 3, 4. And yeah, this part here was up against the firewall, and had to use the angle grinder to get that. And it still took about 30 minutes. But we got this off. And now I will test fit the new piece in there and mark the 2.5-inch hole that's got to go somewhere in here for the rod to go through to the booster and connect up to the brake pedal. Alright, the instructions I have say come 7 inches down, come 8.5 inches in from the hood hinge, and that's where you drill your hole. But I'm not going to do that. What I'm doing is I'm test fitting the piece in here, and I've got it wedged in with a board, and it's kind of in there. I've got a level in there, and I'm making sure that the brake arm, this is the brake arm coming down from it, clears the steering column. This isn't the original steering column, so it's another reason why. Actually, it'll go over a little bit, so I'll have like a 1/2 inch clearance down there. And the location of the brake pedal, actually I'd like it to go to the right a little bit, but it's fine. And it's got the steering column's got to be centered right here, and it's got to be able to bolt right here, so I'm gonna have to drill a couple of new holes to get that to line up here. But basically that's how I'm doing it. I've been working on this for about an hour. Measure 100 times, cut once. It's my motto. All right, I got the hole drilled in the firewall, the 2.5-inch hole. I used this old cheapo Amazon diamond bit very carefully with a drill at a kind of a slow speed. Drilled through that. Now I got to put the 4 holes in, and yeah, to match the template, and see if we can get that guy bolted in place. All right, I've got the bracket in place, so I'm ready to put the booster on. And before I do that, I guess I could do this at any time, but I want to make sure that this pin on the booster is adjusted properly. The master cylinder, you know, goes on here, and the distance between this push pin and this push pin, when they're bolted together, needs to be 20 thousandths of an inch. And since they're both recessed, and this one is actually tapered, I got this special tool from Eckler's. And what you do is you put this in so it's flush, and you push this pin in till it just hits the push pin in there. And it's got a round taper on it, as does the socket here. And then you take the other side. So this was the part on the master cylinder side. Then you take the, you tighten this up, and there needs to be 20 thousandths of an inch clearance between the tool and that pin. And I measured it with a feeler gauge, and it is from the factory. So luckily, I don't have to do it, but it's always good to check that, because if it's too tight, you're going to be dragging your brakes, and they can possibly lock up. If it's too loose, you have too loose a pedal, and it goes too far down to the floor. So it's important to get that adjustment right. All right, got the booster bolted on. 4 bolts under the dash. Let's get a little light here. yeah, you can see the 1, 2, 3, and 4. There they are. They're nice and tight. I've got the other 2 bolts right here tight. You can see I had to drill new holes in the bracket to get that to line up properly. Who knows on a 60-year-old truck. And it's the same 2 bolts that hold the bracket on, that hold the steering column on. All right, I think I've got to relocate the aftermarket fuse panel because it was in the way of the bracket. And that's just a couple of holes in the firewall. Try to clean this wiring up a little bit, get the steering column back up. I cannot hook up the brake arm to the booster because my kit didn't include that piece. It's on order. It should be here Monday, a couple of days. So in the meantime, I'll get all the rest of this cleaned up. And then the next job is to disassemble the master cylinder and booster that's under the floorboard here. All right, I already started taking this stuff off underneath the truck. This is where the brake pedal comes through. I'll take this nut off. A couple of bolts here, 5/8 heads holding the bracket on that holds the booster. I already took the master cylinder off behind the booster right here. Just the rear brake line, the front line from the proportioning valve, and 2 bolts holding the brake master cylinder to the booster. So we'll get all this old stuff out of here. Okay, I just finished the plumbing. Ran these lines down to, this is the front brake, so it just went into a union. See if I can even zoom in on it. Down at the bottom, right there, for the front brake, and then the rear brake is further back, and it's this guy right here. I put the loop in. They say that's a good idea. It's, you know, as things flex, that the line, you know, is able to flex with it, or if you ever need to move it, you have extra line. Anyway, it didn't hurt, and it looks okay, so I went ahead and put the loops in. This is the 3/16 union I used to connect the new line to the rear brake line, and cut it to length. Use this flare tool to flare the ends of the line. Put these connectors on, and just a regular plumbing tubing cutter to cut the tubes to length. So I have everything finger tight. I'll go ahead and tighten the lines up, tighten the master cylinder. And that should be it on the plumbing side. All right, it's 2 weeks later on the 56 brake project. The new parts came in. These are the original parts, the bracket that they sent me. And to get it to work properly, I had to drill a couple of holes because I couldn't get it to fit correctly. And then when I went to put the brake arm on, the clevis that hooks up to the booster rod that comes out here is over here. So I called the company. I said, you guys sent me the wrong brake arm, that this brake arm needs to be over here. Well, turns out that the brake arm was correct, but the bracket was wrong. So they sent me this new bracket. And I already have the holes drilled in the firewall. So to get this bracket to work, I had to drill some holes here. And I think I can use the same hole in the firewall and everything will be fine. So let me see if I can get this new bracket installed. All right, we got everything buttoned up inside. Got the brakes bled. And works well. took it on a test drive and everything's working well. So another good job done on the 56. Thanks for watching.